In this video, I am going to answer the following question. How does The Last of Us Part 2 advance its story through gameplay? First, The Last of Us Part 2 uses dialogues that get triggered throughout each level. The characters advance the story by giving information about the game world, events, and their own interests and problems. This is also a way that developers use to develop the characters. This proves that this game uses an active narrative, which means it has many predetermined points to trigger dialogues and cutscenes. This feature is also present in its predecessors. In The Last of Us, you can talk with Ellie whenever this icon appears. This feature plays a big role in developing the relationship between Joel and Ellie. Also in The Last of Us Left Behind, which is a DLC that was released for the first game, this feature is present as well. But instead of talking with Ellie, you talk with Riley. It's almost the same in the sequel. The only difference is that there are more characters that you can talk to. According to an article by Caitlin Tremblay published on GameIndustry.biz, the narrative should help explain the gameplay, and the gameplay should feel right at home in the narrative. This is very related to this point because the dialogues should be blended in gameplay in a way that makes them transparent to players. This way, they follow the story somewhat unconsciously. Second, all the game objects you see in the levels contribute to environmental storytelling. The most important examples are dead bodies, interactive notes, and buildings. But most of these objects help the players to understand the backstories of the locations and minor characters rather than the main plot. Chris Solarski talks about the effect of these in his book. Such content adds authenticity to the game world, which players can voluntarily investigate should they wish. The Last of Us Part 2 uses this as one of its methods to tell story and gameplay, but there are many games that solely rely on this. For example, Inside tells its story entirely using the environments, puzzles, and objects. Journey also does the same, but its story is less abstract than Inside. Certainly, there are other innovative ways to tell story through gameplay, but they need to be discovered by the new generation of designers. Yoon-Sung Chen writes about this in an article. Despite the growing interest in interactive storytelling techniques, their actual applications to traditional gameplay design remain to be investigated. The third and final method the game uses to advance its story through gameplay is combat sequences. Not all combat sequences are important narratively, but they advance the story because players get to interact with the most thrilling parts of the narrative. This section includes fighting with different groups and gangs, as well as boss fights. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, another game by Naughty Dog, also uses this technique to advance the story. These encounters are one of the most interesting parts of video games. But as a side note, I want to talk about one of their challenges. The problem is that they are also the source of debates on the effects of violent video games. However, most players argue that the distinction of violence in video games and violence in real life is very clear. This topic is known as gamer's dilemma. According to Karim Nader, some virtual actions that we consider impermissible outside of the virtual world are seemingly permissible in the game world, since they have no real non-virtual consequences. Aaron Marcus has also helpful insight on this. According to him, here the player can safely experience conflict and above all failure. Being a fundamental feature of the medium, the possibility of failing is what makes games what they are, challenging and meaningful. In conclusion, The Last of Us Part 2 uses different ways such as in-game dialogues, environmental storytelling, and action sequences to advance the story through its gameplay. With the combination of these methods and its breathtaking cutscenes, The Last of Us Part 2 tells a transformative story about loss, revenge, and forgiveness.